Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Killam. I'm with the Wycliffe Global Alliance communications team, and today we're going to be looking into the topic of rediscovering wonder. If you are a writer, a photographer, a videographer, any sort of creative work that you may be doing, I think we can agree that wonder is essential to doing that job well and to staying interested in that job over long periods of time. So let's get to a session. This is a session that I did with the Evangelical Press Association convention in April of 2024, and we're going to repeat it here as a video for the benefit of anyone who is interested. So let's get started. Let's start with a picture from several weeks back. This was in, I believe, late March. In the US here, at least in other parts of the world, there was an eclipse that happened that helped a lot of people really rediscover their senses of wonder. They drove many miles to see this, to places of totality where the eclipse was especially uh, visible. And it was interesting to see how a phenomenon in the sky, in space, captivated the attention of our culture, at least briefly, and was actually kind of encouraging to see that. And then a couple of weeks after that, we had maybe the best display of aurora borealis or northern lights than we've had in generations, at least here in the US. I know there are other parts of the world that see this regularly, and also there are southern lights in the far southern regions of the world. But here where I live in Illinois in the Midwest US, this is very rare. And so again, going out in the middle of the night to watch the sky is not something that is often done around where I live. And it was kind of, again, this rediscovering wonder in a way, and just looking at things that we have no control over and marveling for me and for other believers of the works of God and the creativity of God. So those are a couple of slides to just set a scene for us as we move ahead here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself so that you can see where this presentation comes from for me. That's me in the picture at a place called Cannon Beach, Oregon, in the western US. I am drawn to God most through his creation. I love to be out in nature in beautiful places, especially with a camera, but I really love just being present in places that make me feel small and that showcase the wonder of creation. And so if that is not you, please stick with us, because it's not the only thing we're going to be looking at in terms of wonder. We'll be looking at some other sources as well, but it's a starting point for me, and generally for a lot of people who do creative work. I think the beauty and wonder of nature is a good starting point. So here is a scripture from Psalm 111, verse 10, and this is the English Standard Version. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who practice it have a good understanding. His praise endures forever. And then there's an interesting commentary on this verse by Tim Keller, famous American pastor who died last year. And Tim Keller wrote, in the original language, fear the Lord doesn't mean to be afraid. It means sustaining a joyful, astonished awe and wonder before him. So again, we are kind of on that theme of wonder and awe, and directing that at God and his works. These are the days of miracle and wonder is a song, or is a lyric from a song by Paul Simon back in the 1980s. It has nothing to do with our topic today, but I've always liked that line. The picture here is one that I shot last winter. It's of something called hoarfrost, Hoar, and then frost. At a certain temperature and humidity point, ideally when it's foggy and just above freezing, The temperature barely then drops below freezing, so the fog freezes on surfaces, and you get this amazing hoarfrost, which is ice crystals that form on everything. And it makes plants and other things, fences, anything around look very wondrous. So a couple of other pictures here with these ice crystals. These are just iPhone photos, so they're not the best. But I think you can even see from there, sometimes if we could just see something like this and walk or drive right past. But every once in a while, if you stop and look at something closely, you will see things that are amazing. And so it's worth it. We all have cameras with us now, almost all the time in the form of a smartphone. And so stop and take a look at wondrous things rather than just walk right by. It's a good habit to build. Here's a quote: "One cannot help but be in awe when he contemplates the mysteries of eternity, of life, of the marvelous structure of reality. It is enough if one tries merely to comprehend a little of this mystery every day. Never lose a holy curiosity." That comes not from a pastor or theologian, but from Albert Einstein, uh, the great physicist, scientist. And I think it's wonderful when even people who are deeply immersed in the science world can just grasp that sense of wonder and curiosity. The picture here is one that I took in Dallas, Texas, a few years ago at a place called the Texas Discovery Gardens. And this is a blue morpho butterfly. The interesting thing about these butterflies is when you see them up close, their wings are usually folded shut and they're brown with some spots. So when they open like this, you see this blue, even a little bit green or purple, and you think that's the color of that butterfly, but the color is actually not that. The color of that butterfly is translucent like a mirror. So what you're actually seeing here is a reflection of the trees and the sky in that butterfly's wings. And that to me is just astounding, that God would create something that mirrors his creation, literally. So I've always liked that picture and that memory because of that thought. There's a very good book that's been out a couple of years now called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And that is written by a famous music producer here in the US, Rick Rubin. He's worked with many of the top music artists in many genres. But it's a book on creativity, as the title would imply. And here's a quote from it: "When you see what's present around you as if for the first time, you start to realize how astonishing it all is. As artists, we aim to live in a way in which we see the extraordinary hidden in the seemingly mundane." And then he goes on to say, "Then challenge ourselves to share what we see in a way that allows others a glimpse of this remarkable beauty." And that's a great description of what we do as creative people, whether it's writing, photography, videography, audio, other things. Just the ability to share what we see and allowing others that glimpse of wonder. And it might be something that someone else has not even noticed until we point it out. And that leads to my next point. Good writers, photographers, and videographers develop an eye for detail and a supreme sense of curiosity and wonder. They notice details, surprises, story angles that others might miss. A seemingly insignificant moment or a mundane observation might provide the means to communicate something deeper. And there's such an opportunity there for us as ministry communicators, people who are tasked with telling God's stories, to look for those curiosity and wonder moments that may not be as obvious to some, but that we can train ourselves to watch for and recognize. Here's an example. This is in Glacier National Park in Montana. My wife and I were out at sunrise, and there was fog at the top of this mountain. And as the fog cleared just a little, we saw this bighorn sheep, and he just kind of slowly came into focus in the fog. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And it made me think of some implications for storytellers. And here they are. One would be remain in the darkness or the fog long enough for your eyes to adjust. You will see things that others miss. That's kind of what I've been saying so far here. But this is a good, vivid illustration of that, is letting your eyes adjust. Another example would be in this, if you're looking at stars at night in a very dark sky place, your eyes need about 15 or 20 minutes to adjust to the low light, and you start to see way more stars, far more stars than other places. And but you do have to let your eyes adjust and be patient with that. The next one is observe prayerfully. Help others see God in places and situations where he isn't readily evident. The next one, let those ever so brief glimpses of glory awaken your sense of wonder. Let them serve as reminders that God is close and active even when our view is obscured or partially obscured. Here's an example of that point. This is the same morning that my wife and I were up at the top of this mountain in Glacier National Park. It's a place called Logan Pass, and we were just in a thick cloud. You couldn't see much of anything. The sun was rising, but we couldn't tell. And then all of a sudden, there was a clearing, a break in the fog, and the sun hit the top of this mountain here, and we got this amazing view. And again, you can take a scene like that and turn it into an illustration, a story, devotional type thing. This is a part of what I wrote about that. To me, fog-bound moments speak of hope and of God's faithfulness. We had been here before, and we knew what was behind those clouds, though we couldn't see it at that moment. When the golden peaks would briefly come into view, the moment was transcendent, like an ever so brief glimpse of eternity. Little did my wife and I know at that moment that we were approaching a season of thick fog where every next step would need to be taken in faith. Sometimes the fog clears momentarily, and then it comes right back. But a wind is blowing. We've received enough glimpses above the fog to know we're headed in a Godward direction. Whether we can see it or not, his glory is close at hand, and that is enough. Again, you can use your own life experiences, especially if there's a photo involved, and write something that's very personal and yet relatable to an audience. I said this wasn't going to be all about nature photos, and it isn't. This is a moment that I had at a clinic in the Middle East that ministers to refugee populations. And so this is a woman from Iraq who is far from her home, but she is at this clinic staffed by missionaries, and she's trying on reading glasses for the first time. So what she's doing here is, this is the first time she's been able to read text messages on her phone screen. And it's a special moment for her. And again, it's recognizing those little moments. The person on the left is a ophthalmologist, and you just can write about those, or you can make those a center point in a story that makes its point about missionaries serving refugee populations. And this is a very vivid way to tell that. Here's another one. This is from a town called Mafraq, Jordan. And a pastor named Noor this is a missionary alliance church in Mafraq, and it was right as the Syrian war was in its early days, and he's here meeting Syrian women who have just crossed the border, often with their families, and they have nothing. They are looking for food and supplies and clothing, and the church became a central point to supply these things to families who were coming into Jordan from Syria. So I was there reporting that story and happened to be there early in the morning as the sun was illuminating the cross behind Pastor Noor here. And again, you just develop an eye for things that go beyond the immediate and what you're seeing. So you realize that cross being illuminated was very significant to this story. So it's something we were able to use. I worked with Wycliffe Canada for a little while on an interim basis to help their communications team. And we sent a story team to the Solomon Islands. And the story was about Bible translation going on in the Solomons. But one of our photographer on that trip, Alan Hood, took this beautiful shot of kids playing in a swimming hole and jumping off of this giant tree root. And so as we were thinking about how to present not only the photo, but a theme with it, we thought of this scripture in Jeremiah, but blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. And so you can just, again, make some connections that others might not see through a photo and a knowledge of scripture. Sorry about that. Here's another instance of making connections that others might not immediately see. This is a statue in the town of Line, Slovakia, and it's a statue of Cyril and Methodius, who were 9th century missionaries to the Slavic people of Eastern Europe. And they were the first people to translate the Bible into Slavic languages. Now, why is that significant in the town of Line, Slovakia? Well, I was there on a trip back when I worked with the seed company, and we were reporting about a translation project there involving these guys. These are 3 Roma men who live in or near that village. Their names are Pavel, Stano, and Miro. And these guys are doing what they never expected to be doing, and that is translating the Old Testament. In fact, this team just finished this work this year. And so in the same town where this statue honors Bible translators, these guys are translating the Bible into another language, into the East Slovak Romani language. And so, again, keeping that sense of wonder and curiosity, I kind of put those two things together in the story. So the first thing I talked about was something they had translated that week. So the story starts like this. It talks about the story in 1 Samuel. But the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 3,000, this is my story now. 3,000 years ago, God sent the prophet Samuel to Bethlehem to anoint Israel's new king. In Jesse's house, 7 strong sons stepped forward one at a time. None was God's choice. Are these all the sons you have? Samuel asked. They're still the youngest, Jesse replied, but he's out in the fields watching the goats and the sheep and goats. Go get him, Samuel said. The boy, of course, was David. God's choice to lead his people was a shepherd boy everyone had overlooked completely. Then, after setting that story out, I go back and talk about the statue. In the center of Line, Slovakia, stands a statue of Cyril and Methodius, the 9th century brothers who first translated scripture for the Slavic people. Just around the corner, their spiritual descendants set up simple wooden tables, laptop computers, and a coffee maker, then set about translating the Old Testament into the local Romani language. They work inside an unassuming structure that was once a family home, but now hosts a vibrant Roma church. Someday soon, a local pastor will stand in this very spot and preach from the scriptures the team is now translating. For 3 men who once felt like the least qualified Bible translators on the planet, that's astonishing. Stano Tanchos recalls the day that he and fellow translators Pavel Godla and Miro Mitac reached 1 Samuel chapter 16, the story of David's anointing as king. We came to a standstill, Stano said. It really spoke to us. It really touched us. God doesn't look at what a person looks like or their abilities, but he looks at the heart. It's a very powerful word. So again, we're taking several things observed by writers and photographers and forming the basis of a story from that and finding connections between those things that others might not immediately see, but it's a way to help people understand not only what these guys are doing in translating the Bible, but the context they're doing it in and the historical context of what they're translating. So there is much wonder in something like that and much just joy in the work that they're doing that we were able to bring out. This is an interesting little book called The Wonder Switch. It's by a guy named Harris III, who, believe it or not, is a magician. He's a Christian believer. He wrote this book about wonder, and he said, when wonder is awake, we use our imagination the way we did as children to dream, create, innovate, and solve problems. We immersed ourselves in stories of make-believe that were filled with possibility. When wonder dies, our ability to innovate in productive ways dies with it. But because our imagination is always active in filling in the blanks of the story, we use it to worry. That so much describes culture right now. I'm thinking in my cultural context in America, there is so much worry and fear among Christians who have no business worrying or being fearful. But it is in many ways destroying wonder and destroying the ability to innovate and do creative things. We also just miss wonder sometimes because we're too busy. Here's maybe my favorite newspaper story ever. This is the L'Enfant Plaza subway station in Washington, D.C. And in 2007, an editor and writer from the Washington Post named Gene Weingarten decided to try an experiment. He sent world-renowned violinist Joshua Bell into that subway station with his violin. And I'll just read the top part of the story as this was published in 2007. He emerged from the metro, that's the subway, at the L'Enfant Plaza station and positioned himself against a wall beside a trash basket. By most measures, he was nondescript, a youngish white man in jeans, a long-sleeved t-shirt, and a Washington Nationals baseball cap. From a small case, he removed a violin. Placing the open case at his feet, he shrewdly threw in a few dollars in pocket change as seed money, swiveled it to face pedestrian traffic, and began to play. Now, what happened was, I guess, fairly predictably, most people walked right by, paid no attention to the fact that not only was this a world-renowned violinist playing a piece by Bach, but he was playing it on a Stradivari violin made by Stradivari in 1713. It's worth millions of dollars. And so the story goes on. Each passerby had a quick choice to make, one familiar to commuters in any urban area where the occasional street performer is part of the cityscape. Do you stop and listen? His performance was arranged by the Washington Post as an experiment in context, perception, and priorities, as well as an unblinking assessment of public taste. In a banal setting, at an inconvenient time, would beauty transcend? And the story at one point says this. This story won the Pulitzer Prize, by the way. It was wonderful. And if you've never read it, I would really encourage you to go find it. The link is shown here. You can go and find it at washingtonpost.com. It's called Pearls Before Breakfast. And if you don't have a Washington Post subscription, you can find it for free at pulitzer.org if you look at the 2008 winners for feature writing. Anyway, the writer, Gene Weingarten, says, the poet Billy Collins once laughingly observed that all babies are born with a knowledge of poetry because the lub-dub of a mother's heart is in iambic meter. Then, Collins said, life slowly starts to choke the poetry out of us. It may be true with music, too. There was no ethnic or demographic pattern to distinguish the people who stayed to watch Bell or the ones who gave money. from the vast majority who hurried on past unheeding. Whites, blacks, and Asians, young and old, men and women were represented in all three groups. And here's the significant part that I noticed, but the behavior of one demographic remained absolutely consistent. Every single time a child walked past, he or she tried to stop and watch. And every single time, a parent scooted the child away. That says so much about people, about our culture, about our world today in a way that I think we can very much identify with. And again, we're back on that theme of wonder and curiosity and how it's non-existent so often, and we have to help people with it. And so this is my thought now. Wherever we may find ourselves as communicators, ever developing senses of curiosity and wonder, open our eyes to countless stories and images that others might walk right past. Then we get to show them what they missed. This is Zion National Park. I was there with my brother in 2019 and taking pictures of stars, and it was one of those dark skies places, like I mentioned earlier. And I really like this quote from Christianity Today in December of 2023. The author Kurt Gatliff says, "Awe drives us to contemplate the big questions of life, the ones so easily drowned out by the humdrum of our everyday routines. For Christians, awe leads to wonder, which leads to worship. Awe has a decentering effect that directs our attention away from the self, which is no small thing in a world awash with algorithms that cater to our every preference." So we really have to consciously seek wonder and creativity and curiosity, and it can quickly disappear if we're not careful. And our jobs, again, as communicators, is to help others to come up with that same sense of wonder, and we may need to guide them. So here's what I would say as next steps. Slow down is one thing. Take a walk with your phone camera. One thing that we could mention here is that Jesus lived life at 3 miles an hour, which is the speed that people walk. And he didn't find a need to get so much done in a day that you can't even remember it all, but he worked at a reasonable pace. And sometimes we can just slow down and look around. I show this picture. I took this in Glacier National Park in Montana, and I had my camera pointing the other direction at the sunrise and over a mountain. And the sunrise wasn't that great, but I took a minute to turn around and look the other way and saw this beautiful stream flowing down toward the lake where I was sitting and watching the sunrise. And sometimes if you just look the other direction and take a minute to look around at your surroundings, you'll spot things that maybe others might have missed. So the next piece is look around. Use all five senses. Sometimes our sense of smell, of taste, of touch can be very revealing in terms of the wonder we can point out to others. So when we write or take photos or edit, we can remember those things too as descriptors. Notice things that have changed. One thing that's a good thing to do is if you either walk or drive to an office, take a different route every day and notice things that are different and notice what's happening around you. If you go the same exact way every day, you start to not notice things and you get to work and not even remember going. So it's a very good idea to vary your surroundings and look at different things. And don't rely only on the spectacular. Some of the photos I've shown you, at least for me, felt spectacular. And those are great moments. I was in Utah just last week looking at stars and looking at beautiful rock formations and photographing rock formations. But there are beautiful things all around us wherever we are, and we can just awaken our senses to that kind of thing too. Here's an example of that. In fact, I gave this talk to my own team on the Wycliffe Global Alliance communication and prayer team And one of our team members took a walk afterwards with her phone camera and started taking pictures of flowers growing and thriving in hard places, and really came up with an interesting little photo essay that would have many, many spiritual applications, just because she was conscious of the wonder around her and was conscious of looking for things that might even be God speaking to us in interesting and unique ways. So take a walk with your camera and see what you might discover. It's a good little exercise to do. I mentioned Jesus walking at the speed of 3 miles an hour, or living at the speed of 3 miles an hour, which is walking speed. That comes from this little video called Godspeed. And I would also highly recommend that if you've never seen it, just as a way to awaken wonder, curiosity, and to slow down in life and notice more things. This is an American pastor who went to live and work in a parish in Scotland for a time, and it's about his experience there. And the URL for this, the place you can find this is livegodspeed.org. So if you do get a chance, it's a wonderful little film, and one that I think you'll enjoy if you've enjoyed this presentation, because it fits very well together. So back to where we started with the eclipse, and thinking about opportunity and thinking about just the fact that people do find themselves attracted to wonder if it's pointed out. And the eclipse was a social media phenomenon, so a lot of people knew about it. And it's one of the good things about social media. There's some bad things about social media as well, but one of the good things is word travels. And something like this, which is just a wondrous event that doesn't happen very often, was known by a lot of people, and people took the time to go and see the eclipse. And I think in lesser ways or in different ways, we can do the same by pointing out the works of God. In fact, those are greater ways, not lesser ways. But as we point out the works of God to people and let them see for themselves, it's a very biblical approach to our jobs, I think. A few discussion questions as we wrap up here. And you can do this on your own or with a team in your workplace. Describe a moment in my life when I felt awe and wonder. Think about what that was like, the circumstances around that. You might want to write that, in fact, and you might just want to see where that takes you. Second one is, how could I become more keenly aware of wonder in my everyday life? And again, you may want to write a little bit there, and you may want to think about some habits that you could establish that help you become more aware of that. And then, what is one thing I can do in the next week to increase my sense of wonder? Maybe it's taking a walk with your camera like my colleague did. Maybe it's writing something, who knows? But I would just encourage you to reflect on those three questions, and not just for what it can do for your job, although it can do a lot if you're a writer or other creative type. Awakening your sense of wonder really does make your work better. But I believe it draws us closer to God as well, which also makes our work better. So I would just say establish good habits around this topic, and you might see a difference in your work. Here's my information. This is my wife, Lauren, and me. We live in the Midwest, US, but I'm at Jim_Killam at Wycliffe.net. And if you're watching this video, you probably are already on our website, wycliffe.net, but I would love to hear from you if I can be of any help, encouragement, inspiration, whatever, for your work. If you have thoughts or questions about this, feel free to contact me at any time. So I hope this has been an interesting few moments as we've talked about this topic together. And I hope this maybe starts a good conversation among you and other coworkers, maybe you and friends, and then it leads to some interesting, productive work, and then it draws you closer to God. Thanks for watching, everybody.